Okay. Okay, this panel is going to be moderated by Konstantine Sepsis, also known as Dino. Dino is a principal with Avison Young. Past 16 years, Dino has developed a reputation for his creative and thorough approach to strategic real estate solutions. He joined Avison Young in 2014 after 11 successful years at MB Real Estate. Dino began as a leasing agent in 2003 and represented landlords including GE Asset Management, Apollo Global Management, Chetwick Group, 1 North Dearborn, 360 North Michigan, and the Teachers Retirement System of the state of Illinois. Today, Dino advises tenants and landlords and draws from his agency leasing background to lend a valuable perspective to the negotiation process. Relying on his vast market expertise, extensive resources, he has successfully closed transactions for local and nationally based clients, including Centro, GFK Holdings, Kafari, NCG Bank OSA. Prior to his career in commercial real estate, Konstantine was a financial analyst with Equity Residential, where he was responsible for underwriting new acquisitions, performing due diligence, and compiling strategic market analysis. He's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater and earned his Juris Doctorate from the John Marshall Law School. Dino is an active member at Mercy Home for Boys and Girls. He resides in Chicago with his wife, Maria, and their 2 children, Alexandra and Theodore. Alexandra, nice name. That's my daughter. Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction. Good morning. Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Dino Sepsis. Thank you again for the introduction. I'm excited to moderate a premier group of real estate experts from various practices to share their input on the state of the market for 2022. Let me introduce you to the panel. We'll start at the end. Jim McDonald, Great Lakes market leader, Ryan Companies. Jim leads strategic vision and provides overall direction for the Ryan development, design, construction, and real estate management and capital market teams that make up the Great Lakes region. He has been with Ryan Companies for more than 2 decades, migrating from construction and development, and has played an integral leadership role in high-profile regional projects across all sectors, including healthcare, industrial, office, multifamily, and mixed use. Brian Quigley, Executive Vice President with Conor Commercial Real Estate, as Executive Vice President, overseeing Conor's Midwest Industrial and Office Group. Brian is responsible for leading a team of commercial real estate professionals and identifying and securing development opportunities on a local and regional basis. Over the course of 25+ years in commercial real estate, Brian has developed over 20 million square feet of industrial and commercial product throughout the Chicagoland area and Midwest region. Next is Ryan Rademann, construction and real estate leader for Lower Great Lakes, Wipfli. Ryan leads Wipfli's construction and real estate practice for the Lower Great Lakes. His specific area of focus is on technology for construction, developers, brokers, and property managers, including the platforms you all use today, such as Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, and Power BI. Ryan is accountable for the regional growth for all Wipfli's construction and real estate offerings, including tax, audit, accounting, and consulting. Next is Geoffrey Kasselman, partner and senior vice president of workplace strategy with CRG. Jeff oversees national accounts and leads all client-related initiatives from the company's expanding industrial, office, and data center project delivery platform. Jeff also provides clients with strategy for the future of the workplace and technology in real estate. And here is Jim Pape, Group President, CRE West, Huntington National Bank. Jim is president of Commercial Real Estate West, consisting of Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Colorado. Jim has over 25 years of experience in banking and 20 years in commercial real estate financing, including Associated Bank, Private Bank, and LaSalle Bank. Jim has been involved in the financing of many commercial real estate deals in Chicago and nationally. The properties have included industrial, multifamily, residential, and retail properties. COVID has changed the world in every aspect. How we live, how we eat, how we socialize, how we shop, how we interact with our families, how we talk, and how we work. This is a unique time where the business cycle and commercial real estate markets are not in sync. Office vacancies are high, and the return to work that's been predicted for months hasn't manifested. Companies are evaluating the long-term need for office space based on a very real desire for a hybrid work from home. By every estimate, overall demand for space will decline. By how much is the only unforeseen variable. Let's jump right into the discussion with Jim McDonald. Jim, what is the importance of commercial real estate development diversification going into 2022? And what are some of the new ways to diversify?
Thank you. Happy New Year to everybody. But it's funny, I haven't seen this many ties in one spot in about 2 years. So maybe the recovery from COVID is happening. But, Ryan is approaching a $5 billion national platform. The Great Lakes region is approaching $1 billion across a variety of sectors and service lines. So we are seeing things at a micro and a macro level, a local, regional, national level. Our priorities from 21 are really, most of them are carrying forward into 22. Capital relationships are going to continue for all of us to be key and maintaining those, growing those relationships. Sector specialization for us, we've got 5 primary or core sectors. The meatiest of those are obviously industrial, multifamily, and senior living, as well as healthcare and some other. And then diversification is something I spend most of my time on as the regional president for Ryan. And diversification can mean a lot of things. For us, it means geographic diversification. We just opened an office in Denver. We've got a new office in Atlanta. We're looking at the East Coast and the Ohio Valley and other areas. It means diversifying our pipeline. We have got a significant amount of industrial development and construction in our pipeline, and how do we diversify within that and into our other sectors? But for me, what diversification needs to really focus on in the real estate industry is on the diversification of our team. So BIPOC hiring, female hiring is going to be really important for us as we move forward. Clients, our customers are demanding progress there, and rightfully so. We are demanding progress of ourselves. Year over year, 2020 to 21, we're very proud of the fact that our diverse hiring of BIPOC team members grew from 14% roughly in 2020 to 38% in 21. And our female hiring grew from, I think, about 22 or 23% to that same 38% mark. So the importance of that for us is goes beyond just, is it the right thing? I think creating that diverse thought and those diverse teams is really going to drive Ryan's business into the future. I think local universities, regional universities, industry groups like this, NIOP, AIR, and others, other companies such as ours, are all going to focus on it. And so I don't know that this is a new thing, but this is probably one of the most important things that we'll do as an industry and as a company for the years to come.
Thanks, Jim. Brian, taking a concentrated look at Chicagoland and the central region, I'm going to hit you with a lightning round of questions. One is, how do you expect the year to play out in terms of land acquisition and development?
Well, good morning, Dino. Good morning, everyone. Brian Quigley with Conor Commercial. 2022 is going to be a great year for industrial, just as 2021 was. At Conor, we completed about 2 million square feet last year and in the Midwest region, and all but maybe 100,000 square feet of that has been leased. And so demand has been very strong. We expect that to continue into 2022. Yes, demand and supply. So demand, as Adam Marshall talked about earlier this morning, 35 million square feet was demand in 2021. We expect that to continue into 2022. Supply is about 30 million square feet, and that is capped. And it's capped because the availability of precast labor, materials, crews to stand panels, steel, roofing material, they're all in short supply. If you wanted to to take down 20 acres today and start a building this summer, you wouldn't be able to get precast. And so the 30 million square feet that we've got projected for 2022, that's not going to increase. So we're out of balance. Demand is in front of supply by about 5 million square feet a year. We've got a 1.3 billion square foot market here in Chicago. We're about 75 million square feet vacant, and that's a historical low, about 6%, less than 6%. And we don't expect that 6% to reach equilibrium, which is about 8% vacancy. And equilibrium means that rental rates are under pressure and are not growing significantly. And tenant inducements are high, free rent is high, and tenant build-out offerings are high, less than 8%. It's more of a landlord's market. And so that means that lease rates are rising, demand is high, tenant inducements are low, free rent is low. And so that's the environment that we're in now. So we expect rental rates to increase at the rate of inflation, maybe 5%. And we don't expect vacancy to rise much above 6% this year. In fact, it's probably going to fall. So the 75 million that's available today is probably going to fall to 70 million square feet.
Thanks, Brian. Ryan, it seems that data is king, and every day we feel a more acute impact of technology in our industry. How do you see business intelligence tools impacting commercial real estate in 2022 and beyond?
Good morning. So Wipfli's got 5,000 construction contractor clients, 5,000 real estate organizations that we serve. And so I think maybe what I'll comment on is kind of the idea that we have a pretty good bird's eye view of the health of these organizations in aggregate, and certainly some perspective on the moves that those that are healthiest have made or are making today. And so when it comes to data, there's in business intelligence, there's kind of a few layers that I'd like to kind of talk about for a moment. So the first is macro data, and today we've gotten a lot of that, right? So if we think about Dodge data or CoStar, or some of the forecasts that we heard of this morning from various economists, that data is available, but I feel like to date, and by attending a lot of the events here in Chicagoland, it's really anecdotal that we're often hearing about that, right? It's an individual's perspective from a lot of different angles, and the market and the players in the market have been able to triangulate that to make good decisions about where to invest across the different food groups. But now we've got the opportunity, of course, to basically subscribe to data sets along those lines. And that said, when you're on a web service that provides that data, and you're out there on a website looking at different charts or graphs around absorption, for example, or material availability, it's still siloed, it's segmented, just like all the different reports you can get from within your business. And so what we are seeing that's really, really interesting is the organizations that have a business intelligence dashboard of sorts, right? That's able to pull that data in from that external source, and then start to layer in kind of the 3 or 4 other layers to it. So the second layer to that, from our perspective, would be that portfolio level data, right? So the asset managers or the brokers that have kind of a portfolio of projects that they're working on, being able to manage, of course, or see the data on the returns that they're getting, and then leading indicators about what's going to drive the returns in the near future, whether those are economic trends or they're specific micro to our business around, the lease expirations that we have coming up and the rent roll, the things that the providers of debt, of course, are wanting to see, and our LP equity investors. So, being able to layer those two together is a differentiator, and it's harder than most people think. And where it gets particularly complicated is when you layer in project data in the portfolio data, because if we're talking about a contractor, we're talking about a developer, there's often joint ventures involved, right? So the financial systems that are housing the the financial performance or the project budget relative to the plan. It's spread across three different developers' systems, and so bringing that together can be complicated, but it's not at all insurmountable, right? And so folks are doing that, and then they're layering in the performance around job costing. And the last one, and this is where I think it gets the most interesting and ties into. I was so glad to see John pull it up from Huntington this morning. He showed a graph around swipes, right? So it was badge swipes in the office. And talk about a leading indicator, because if you're sitting there, and I'll tell you a funny example. If you go to a rooftop in Fulton Market in the West Loop and you're having dinner, you can see completed tower, recently completed tower after recently completed tower, and you know that the financial health of those buildings is actually fine. They're all leased up. But if you look up, there's not a single floor that's even really, a build out's even really taking place on in a lot of those. So that's one example, right? Where clearly the activity is not really there, but that's maybe just not there yet. We have an office in 1 North Wacker, and they're fully leased, no real problems to speak of. But of course, if you're in the lobby and you're looking around, you're not seeing a lot of people. And so you wonder, how utilized each one of those spaces are that you're not really able to see like you are retail walking around the streets, right? And so that's where I think it's fascinating to think about these property managers and the asset managers monitoring activity in the buildings as a leading indicator for how healthy the lease renewals are going to be, and then thinking about what they can offer to get folks back in the building, utilizing that space so that they don't subsequently see a flight from their space. So whether that's activating restaurants or retail on the ground floor, or just holding amenity events, or doing whatever they can. Maybe it's even instantiating some co-working space in there, right? To allow more flexible solutions that are getting folks in and utilizing the space. And we see things continue to trend towards, what folks are doing from a hospitality perspective or a co-working or shared workspace perspective. Excited to see that continue and to see folks continue to get healthier with regard to the way their space is being used.
Thanks, Ryan. Jeff, you play at the intersection of commercial real estate, energy, and technology. Where do you see workplace strategy heading in 2022? And how will it continue to evolve?
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to see people in person despite all the circumstances out there. So I just want to say that. In answer to your question, Dino, we're going to be called upon to solve the work from home conundrum, and we probably won't solve it. In truth, I think what we've learned from COVID, and it was a nice tee up at the beginning of the session, is that we have to rely or pivot to technology to remain productive in times of crisis. And it could be a COVID crisis, or it could be a natural disaster, it could be other things, and that we can do it. And I've seen the math on it, and it's compelling. But what we risk in that is the magic that happens by being together in the office. And I actually personally am a believer in the magic that happens by being together in the office. There's a cultural aspect to it. There's a training aspect to it, especially for new entrants into the workforce. You can't put them on a work from home computer on a permanent basis and expect they're going to acclimate, learn, perform, appreciate culture, and carry the banner of the company ultimately in whatever role they play without being in person some of the time. So I think what we're really talking about now is how to optimize workplace strategy so that sometimes it's in person and sometimes it's work from home. You might start to see that in more organized ways in 2022. You could see 4-day work weeks. CRG personally has a 5-day work week, but with 4 days in the office, with the exception of this week. We took this week off and said, hey, this might be a dangerous week for all of us to be together. But we're nimble enough not to make that a policy for the rest of the year or even the rest of the month. I'm not even sure what our policy will be next week, quite honestly. But whatever it is, we'll pivot because we now have the ability to do that. So I think that's really the big thing, Dino, about workplace strategy. I think the other thing that you'll see in 2022 is a higher prioritization around ESG and energy priorities or energy strategies. How to use it, when to use it, what to pay for it. Like everything else, it has a supply and a demand component. Prices are up, demand is up, disruption due to supply chain, due to lack of labor, due to lack of infrastructure investment. All of those things are factors in the energy space. Compliance, government mandate, corporate mandate. I don't want to get preachy about climate change, but climate change is beyond theory at this point. It's a real thing. It is existential. And if we can't solve for that, and energy being a subset of that, all the other things that we talk about at the end of the day just don't seem to matter as much if we're not here on the earth living in a way that's worth living. And so energy really is pivoting to the forefront in 2022. And then the last thing is really inflation and what it does to pricing of everything, cost of capital, rents, land pricing. That impact in 2022 is really going to be significant. That was touched on by the economists who spoke earlier, so I won't go into detail on that. But to me, those are sort of the big things that workplace strategy is going to be discussing in 2022.
Thanks, Jeff. Jim, let's tell us what the lenders are doing. What kind of projects are you interested in backing in today's economic and social climate?
Sorry about that. So what we are seeing in the banks is it's been very interesting. If I go back 2 years ago, I was on this panel before the pandemic, and we were all talking about how 2020 it was going to be a great year, and 2 months later, we all shut down. Banks weren't lending. They were concerned what was going to happen, didn't know what's going on. Most banks, middle market banks, were doing a lot of construction loans. Those all slowed down. So now 2021 comes out. Banks need to, they don't have that construction portfolio because they weren't doing it. The loans that they had on the books that had been funded up, they were being paid off through Fannie Freddie, especially if it's residential, CMBS market, because rates were low, non-recourse, all that. They were moving them out. So banks pivoted and went to more of a term value-added properties. Reason why they needed to do that, with interest rates being so low, they needed to get money out the door, full dollars. Problem with construction loans, and especially with the amount of equity that is being put in it, it takes almost 6 to 9 months before the bank starts funding a loan. So if I close a loan on a construction in January, I'm not funding and getting interest on that until sometime in probably August or September. Whereas I fund that same loan, a term loan, I'm getting that money out the door. So what happened? Pre-pandemic, we were seeing rates drop below, closer to 200 over LIBOR. During the pandemic, all of a sudden you're seeing floors coming in, rates going up to 300, 350, because everybody wanted to slow down and understand what's happening. All of a sudden in 2021, it was like the switch went on and rates started diving. You're now seeing on term debt, because there's so much capital out there from all the different banks, finance companies, all around, everybody, equity sources, you're seeing that rates are dropping on, investment product where the tenant is an investment, you're seeing below 200 on LIBOR. Now we're at SOFR, but you're seeing 150, 160. So margins that squeeze. Construction is coming back. That also is squeezing. Huntington, we are very looking at a lot of loans. I thought 2021 was going to be really difficult because of the amount of term. Most middle-sized banks will look at doing more construction. That's usually what the portfolio was made up. We turned it around, we pivoted, and we were doing a lot more term. We ended up being above our budget for the year. 2022, we're expected to do even more, of course. And I see right now our pipeline is very strong. As far as product type, it's kind of dwindling. You know, a couple of years ago, retail you don't really want to do retail, you know, unless it's with a great relationship and good sponsors. Now all of a sudden office, and that's why I was asking what's happening in the city of Chicago, downtown. What's going to happen to these offices? Because that'll be a big play in a lot of the other offices. We saw a pivot from the city. Prior to Huntington, we were TCF. We weren't doing any of the large buildings in the downtown area, urban. We were doing more of the Fulton Market, the suburbs. We pivoted more to the suburbs because we felt a lot of those were incubator style buildings. People didn't want to go in elevators. What was going to happen? We actually saw some tenants having rent downtown and also in the suburbs, which was interesting. So we did that. We're now starting to see some more coming back. Office, again, with a good relationship, with a good customer that has the experience, you know, we're going to take a look at that office. Again, the big thing is residential and industrial. Industrial is so hot right now. You know, it's crazy. Everybody wants to finance it. Spec industrial, not unusual. Non-recourse, not unusual. Think the banks are still wondering, when is it going to stop? When is it going to slow down? I mean, I've been through the downturns in industrial. I've seen it. It does happen. The other thing is residential apartments. You know, in the city of Chicago, the downtown area, and even around the West Loop, we saw a slight slowdown, but then it picked up. Rents are going up again. Leases are coming in. The unusual thing was even the BC apartment buildings in the city and more in the neighborhoods. In the past, you didn't see that dropping. You know, a lot of those buildings were converted during pre-last downturn. You saw those converted. So whatever was apartments, you saw those at, you know, 95, 100% occupancy. This turn, we saw that dropping. People were going back home. Kids were going back home. They were staying with their parents. They didn't want to be in apartment buildings. So that has all come back. So that's all positive. So we're looking at everything. If it's a relationship, that's what we're striving for. I think most banks our size are looking at the relationship. It's all about relationship, location, and that's what we're seeing.
Thanks, Jim. Labor and transportation shortages is definitely a topic that's trending today. And I'd like to ask the panel, from an operator's perspective, how are you dealing with those shortages on both fronts to meet demand? And you know, I'd like to hear who of you would like to take that one. Jim?
Well, I'm not qualified, but I'll make something up. You know, I'm not an expert in labor and transportation, but what we're hearing from our customers is this is an issue that they're going to be trying to manage through for years into the future. And some of it is aging population. Some of it is the great resignation. Candidly, the construction trades are dealing with similar things, right? How do we get new blood into the trades? So transportation is the same. They've got the same challenges. There's from a development perspective, urban infill on industrial creates policy challenges that are impacting industrial development and how you stage and move trucks in and out of your facility through neighborhoods, et cetera. Chicago is managing through that currently. So the short term is wage increases. How can we pay more? How can we pay people more to do these jobs? There's government policy that you hear about in the news, and is it effective? How long will it take for it to actually, for us to see gain from that? What we are doing, what Ryan is doing is really investing more time and effort into market analytics and labor analytics for our own developments and construction, but also primarily for our customers. How do we help them better define labor markets so they can make effective decisions?
I might add a couple thoughts on that. So it seems to me actually that the labor challenges that exist across all sectors of the economy is something that's being solved today across many of those sectors in a way that I feel the construction industry was a pioneer for. So if I think back to attending an AGC summit a few years back, the unions were pretty big there, speaking of the different things that they're doing, planting seeds with folks that are, kids, right? Young kids. And in Wisconsin, there's it's now like a YouTube channel, but back in the day, it used to be on like the PBS channel, right? Where they'd be going around doing tours of job sites, trying, cool heavy equipment, right? Cool construction activity happening, trying to spur some excitement around that. And then, of course, you'd pick them up a little bit later on in high school via like the school to work type programs, right? And trying to funnel folks into the trade schools. So if you kind of juxtapose that against a number of other sectors, and I'll kind of use the accounting or consulting profession maybe as a proxy, is this conversation that's happening now around building talent versus buying talent. Build versus buy has always been a challenge, and it's being said more and more now that great firms are firms that can build talent. And you can't expect, though, right, that means pulling folks in entirely mid-career and then just having this really fantastic onboarding program. It definitely needs to be thought about over the course of a 10-year span and developing a workforce over, playing that long of a game. So maybe in this case, we're just talking more like, really robust internship programs and really robust on the job training, planning for something that's not, gonna play out for some number of years. But I think it's cool to see what the trades have been doing for a long time being modeled now in more professional industries.
I was wondering, from the construction side, we've seen in the banks, costs going up on projects. And that commodities don't go down. They continue to go up. How are the construction companies, CRG, Conor, and Ryan, dealing with them? And then also, what was brought up earlier, interest rates, increase in interest rates. We're starting to look at it a little bit more, stressing the rates a little bit more to see, how this can, at the end of 5 years, if you've got a 5-year term, how is it refinanceable in the market? So what are the developers and construction companies doing about it?
Well, for CRG, we're sort of merchant developers. For the most part, we're selling everything that we develop as soon as we can, build it and stabilize it. And so when it comes to price increases, because they're certainly they're up 40% almost across the board from a year ago. The good news is the folks here at the table are experiencing the same thing. So the consumer of the space, the consumer of the development, if they want to shop around, is going to get that price increase regardless of which brand or which property they might go with. But we price it out. If the rental rate that we quote to the user makes sense for the user, we transact. If the exit cap rate, which has been favorable, increasingly favorable, probably not so much in 2022. If inflation is the thing we think it is, and the Fed has signaled 2 or 3 bumps on interest rates, I think you can expect cap rates to follow that a little bit. So I don't think they're going any lower in 2022, probably going a little bit higher. But nonetheless, if the math of the deal works, then the deal occurs. If the math doesn't work, the deal doesn't occur. And it doesn't have to be that much more complicated than that relative to cost increases. It's more a function for us, I think, of the lag time of delivery and of labor availability, which is a much more direct impact to the operation of the organization and has a longer term impact, as well. I'd be curious to hear what Conor and Ryan have to say about it, but I think we're all sort of in the same boat together.
Well, let me jump in on that, Jeff. So if let's say a typical 300,000 square foot warehouse facility is pretty typical for what Conor builds. And I would say last year, this time, we were looking at starting one in Bartlett. And the shell and site work was about $50 per square foot. And that same building today is about $70 per square foot. So about 40% increase in price. And most of that is related to steel and roofing. So steel, used to be $8 a building foot, and now it's 20. And so you think about that percentage increase, it's completely nuts. And then getting a hold of the steel and getting a hold of precast. Roofing material, you can't even get pricing on. And so when it's available, then we'll tell you what the price is. And so that's a pretty tough way to do business. Historically, we've been bailed out by lower cap rates, higher sale prices. And I don't know that sale prices are going to go much lower than a 4 cap in Chicago. That's kind of a historical low, and prices are north of $100 per square foot for any leased industrial building. And so pretty astonishing. I don't know, maybe I've been in this business too long, but $30 or $40 per square foot used to seem like the ceiling, but now it's and infill is twice that. Infill is $200 per square foot. And one of the other problems that we've got with industrial infill in particular is that Mr. Kagi is assessing these buildings vacant, as soon as they're complete at $140 a foot, and that translates into a $5 or $6 per square foot real estate tax bill, which is just shocking. And so, having that 6B, and really you can't get that 6B started until you're 51% occupied. So delivering spec, you go right to that, giant $5, $6 per square foot real estate tax number, which is really, really expensive. Then flipping to big box industrial and kind of weaving in the inflation. What I've heard Home Depot is doing in some locations is inventorying product. So taking product off of ships and inventorying it for about a year. And during that year, let's say you're, a 1 million square foot industrial building warehouse is warehousing $200 million worth of product. And the inflation rate is 5% per year, which is about what it is today. So, that product, when it comes out of the warehouse, is worth $210 million. The cost to warehouse that product, think about maybe $6 per square foot on a 1 million foot building, $6 million. So, there's no cost to warehousing product. There's actually a benefit. And so we're seeing more and more of that. I think there's one of those happening in Phoenix now, and I expect more of that in Chicago. The large deals in Chicago are coming on stronger. They're, 5 years ago, there were 2 or 3 north of 500,000 square feet. Last year, there was 16. This year, there'll probably be 20. And so I think warehousing, large scale warehousing is back in Chicago.
On that, I'm going to stay with you, Brian, for another question. What does the infill game look like versus large acquisitions and developments in the outer corridors?
Infill is, I think it's going to have a great year in 2022, but you have to be very careful as to who your tenants are. And so what are you fishing for? Companies like DHL, FedEx, some of the third-party logistics, delivery stations. You're not going to warehouse product in last mile locations. They're all about delivery to the consumer. Again, $200 per square foot for product. You want to get that leased immediately. You can't let it sit vacant. And so, understanding who your customers are and pre-leasing is the game for infill. I think we just finished a building in Prospect Heights, 150,000 square feet. I wouldn't call it O'Hare, it's north of O'Hare, but still infill. And we leased that building up in about a year and, achieved over $7 per square foot in rents. Samsung is our lead tenant there. But I would say the hope of landing Amazon for every infill project that you've got, I think those days are done. And so, you've got to figure out who your customer is before you start a speculative infill project, I think.
Thanks, Brian. Is there any other points the panel would like to make before we go to the audience for questions?
I just want to say on the infill thing, infill's a thing, and there will be a lot more of it in 2022, in 23, and 24. It's where the population density is. It's where we as consumers want to consume. It's where the labor force lives. And as the Great Resignation continues to be a thing, Does somebody who lives on the outskirts of the city of Chicago want to drive to Bolingbrook or Joliet to work, or do they want to work at an infill center at I-55 in Kedzie or on Goose Island? I also think we're increasingly conditioned, rightfully or wrongfully, to believe that we can get anything same day or certainly next day. There are actually some companies that are now working on 2-hour turns and 3-hour turns and 1-hour turns and guaranteeing that. And the only way they can do that is with infill space. The problem with infill space in most metropolises, in most CBDs around the country, if not the world, is that each has its own unique set of challenges, its own unique set of infrastructure, its own unique set of terrain, one-way streets, cobblestone streets. It doesn't work equally well everywhere. So achieving scale with it is a bit of a challenge for the operator, but there certainly will be more infill development, smaller buildings worth higher dollars, worth undertaking for the CRGs. And I think the Conors and the Ryans, I shouldn't speak for you guys, but I think all of us in a class of developers will look at those deals more and more and more, and they will pencil more and more and more. So it's a really great question. I think there's going to be a lot of that in 2022.
Thanks, Jeff. Any questions from the audience?
So as we talk about the use of industrial, I think in terms of it, industrial storage is the new retail. So instead of a person going and getting what they want, it arrives at your door, simply said. Has the industry done any kind of studies on what percentage of the population at some point we need to continue to deliver goods this way? We understand that. But at some point, is there an optimum amount of what you want delivered versus what you actually still go out the old retail? So is it 50-50? Is it 60-40?
Yeah, so let me address a couple of elements of that. The first is that I would call it the great experiment right now. Everybody's sort of experimenting with what combination of omni-channel storage, delivery, and retail and return is working and why it's working and whether or not there's scale sufficient enough for the biggest corporations to invest in it and roll it out on a broad basis. And I don't think anybody that I know of, maybe you all know of it ahead of me, but I don't know of anybody who's solved for that. But there's a lot of experiments: buy online, return in store, buy in store, return online. Just keep it and I'll give you a credit. It's cheaper for me to let you keep it than it is to have to process the return. As e-commerce moves into $5 trillion territory globally, 40% of that, almost 40%, according to CBRE anyway, 38 or 39, 40% of that is coming back. Okay. So now we have a return industry that's $1 trillion industry globally, all by itself. Okay. What happens when it comes back? I have to inspect it. Can I do that robotically or do I have to do that manually, right? Is that an in-person thing? What happens when I inspect it? Do I put it back on the shelf? Do I repackage? Do I refurbish? Do I sell for parts? Do I dispose? Has it been contaminated, right? Where do I go? How much will it cost to get there? It's really a complex thing, the returns that come with the retail and the e-commerce. The other thing that I would say about it is that there's a lot of space, office buildings, former restaurants, former retail in the city center that's unaccounted for and unlikely to go back to what it was. And so I do think you'll continue to see some experimentation with those spaces in terms of what works and what doesn't. I also think you're going to see partnerships that are unprecedented, right? The real poster child for that is Kohl's and Amazon, right? You can buy it from Amazon and return it at Kohl's. If you had talked about that 10 years ago, people would have said, oh, you're nuts. Those two would never partner. They compete in some ways. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. But I think you're going to continue to see more and more focus on that last mile. It's where all the cost, 50% of the cost is in that last mile. Right. So it's a really great question, but there's no great solution on the horizon. There's just great experimentation with it.
Get the use of the data
Well, that is a whole, data analytics, and I'm sure Ryan would agree, is quickly moving to the forefront with new tools, with algorithms, with AI, even blockchain, which probably isn't the right thing to talk about on this panel, but if you had everything with its unique tracker associated and on a blockchain, half of the supply chain issues that we are experiencing domestically and globally would have already been solved. The business case for that is immense. The VC investment in blockchain in 2021, just through the first 3 quarters, was up 385% versus the year previous. So smart money, theoretically smart money, has just realized there's scale there and there's opportunity there. And it's something that will serve real estate well, but it will serve the supply chain even better ultimately. Those only just scratching the surface with solutions, really.
Fair to say 5 shipments sent out, 2 to 3 return, Jeff?
Say it again.
Fair to say 5 shipments sent out, 5
Exactly.
packages sent out, 2 to 3 return, which in turn could cause another sub-industry sector?
Exactly right.
Gotcha.
So the
believe
one
it.
thing I wanted to just add on that's kind of good news for folks in this room as it relates to absorption is that for every dollar that is transacted in an e-commerce or delivery type manner versus one that's transacted via a retail setting requires 3 times the square footage to make that happen. And so what I think is interesting is like the sentiment for all of that has been, that this 2-hour delivery, all this represents efficiency. But the reality is not really that it's any more efficient. It's more convenient, and customer experience is what everybody's chasing more so than they are chasing, driving their costs down or their margins up. And so I'll be interested, and I'm sure the returns are one of those, extra 2 square feet per dollar. But
Here's how it was explained to me. So I'm sort of the messenger in this, but commodities that we consume every day, we're going to order online and it's going to show up at our house at the time and place that we want, right? There's nothing experiential about going to Walgreens to buy toilet paper or whatever it is. We don't need to do that anymore, quite honestly. There's too many places to buy it that are too reliable at a reasonable price point to get it to my house or condo or farm or whatever it is within a reasonable period of time. And I can order that a week in advance, the next day, whatever it is, and it's not a problem. So those kind of commodity staples, toothpaste, I don't know what else fits into that category, right? It's not really a retail event anymore. It's an e-commerce event. But that doesn't mean we won't go to the store. We'll go to the store for an experience. Think of RH Gallery, think of the Apple Store, think of, there's so many. Lee was talking about the ice cream store at Michigan Avenue at the old Tripping Time. I can't wait. I live really close to there, so I can't wait for that. We're ice cream fans in the family, so that'll be great. But that's the reason we'll leave and go out and engage in person. So there's going to be a huge dichotomy between those staples and those experiences is what I think you're going to see.
One thing that I wanted to chat about was something that Zeb mentioned on a panel earlier this morning was the melding of retail and industrial, or retail and delivery stations for e-commerce. And I think that's a really interesting concept. So he's got one where he's matching a Target store, retail store with an e-commerce delivery station in the city of Chicago. Really interesting. Our concept at Conor is called Storefront Flex, where we try to create a storefront on one side of the building, and then the back side of the building functions as a delivery station. And just in concept form, it turns out it's very expensive, and it's an unproven concept, and so difficult to attract capital when it's unproven. But I think more over time that concept will get refined, and there'll be some folks who experiment with it, and I think it's maybe it's a new class of real estate. And so I'm pretty excited about it.
It's sort of an urban planning conundrum, right? It's a zoning and ordinance rewrite at the end of the day to have those uses permitted to exist in a location where they were not previously permitted to exist. And what impact does that have on the neighborhood, on the neighbors, and so on? So I really think it's an urban planning challenge ultimately if you're going to solve it at scale.
Maybe one more question right here.
Good morning. We're commercial realtors in the northwest suburbs, and we've been experimenting with the process of taking spaces that have been vacant for a continuing time and putting temporary leases in, like 3-month leases. Like, I'm very familiar with the self-storage business. I used to own one. We used to give 3 months away, was always at the tail end of the lease. So now we're designing a program for like mini med spas to go into these buildings. If you go into a food desert, we're designing programs to put like farmers markets in. What we found working with the municipalities like Matt Frank from Schaumburg and Mr. Kramer from Hoffman Estates is with these big spaces, and we all know the challenges we've faced, and myself being a commercial realtor for over 30 years, we have to think out of the box and design a program where we can expose these startup businesses, which you've seen these people walk away from the jobs. Well, what are they doing? They're opening up new businesses. So they're going to the SBA, and we should have to be able to offer financing, which we are doing in our office right now, and putting temporary situations together. Because what happens? Because these people are hesitant to go into a new business because they want to know if it's going to make it. So if you give them that opportunity, that 6 months, 3 months without the big long-term commitment, you find that you get twice the exposure. We find it. And we find that we're going to get people that are going to stay with us because all of a sudden we've created loyalty and we've given them an opportunity that they could never find anywhere else. I haven't heard of it, but we're on the ground floor of it. And if anybody wants to help us, we're more than willing to talk to you. We're Elite Realty in Schaumburg. Thank you.
Just wonder if ghost kitchens are kind of a, a good example of that too, where, farmers markets were mentioned there, but, to the extent that these organizations can pop up. I mean, it's kind of funny with the food supply chain, or even with those that just can produce the kind of ready to eat meals. Like if you've got a ability to kind of hire or a graphic design talent and can create like a menu that looks at all compelling, then DoorDash or Grubhub or Uber Eats can all of a sudden become the entirety of your distribution channel. And to your point, what's kind of cool about that is thinking about it as an incubator for an organization that will eventually want to scale and start to consume space, maybe for an actual storefront that people could dine in or whatever else might spawn out of that. So kind of exciting.
Anything from the panel? It was a pleasure to host, to moderate the panel this morning. Happy New Year, everybody, and we'll see you next year.